The end of Haven Station. The black void of space was rarely silent. Even without sound, the tension that loomed over Haven Station was deafening. 50 alien warships hovered in formation, their massive hulls reflecting the distant glow of Haven's sun. Their angular silver exteriors shimmered like monolithic daggers, each one more menacing than the last. The unified Galactic Council's fleet, a force meant to be a beacon of peace, had turned into an armada of oppression. And now, its guns were pointed at the last independent human stronghold in this sector, Haven Station. Captain James Carter stood by the viewport of his small merchant vessel, his hands clenched into fists. His stomach churned as he watched yet another refugee ship attempt to flee the station, only to be met with a barrage of warning shots from the blockade. The ship was forced to retreat, slipping back toward the docks with its passengers still trapped aboard. A cold, synthetic voice echoed from his ship's eye. Enemy vessels now total 50. The probability of survival for Haven Station is below 5%. James didn't need the AI to calculate their odds. He could see it plain as day. Haven Station had been humanity's last bastion of freedom in neutral space. It was a place where humans, aliens, traders, and refugees could live without the Council's suffocating control. It had thrived for 20 years, a symbol of cooperation and unity. But the Council had grown impatient with humanity. They had deemed them too unpredictable, too dangerous. Now, Haven was a problem they intended to erase, a betrayer among their own. The comms crackled to life. A voice, smooth and calculated, filled every ship and station-wide channel. Attention, Haven Station. This is Admiral Reed of the Unified Galactic Council Fleet. Your defiance serves no purpose. Surrender now, and all non-human refugees will be granted safe passage. James's knuckles went white. Everyone knew Admiral Victor Reed, the traitor to his own kind. Once a respected captain in the Terran Navy, Reed had sold his soul to the Council, augmenting his body with their technology in exchange for power. Half human, half machine, he now commanded fleets against his own species. A murmur rippled through Haven's command center. They're offering non-humans safe passage, one of the officers scoffed. That means they'll execute every human aboard once they take control. No one spoke after that. They all knew what would happen if the Council seized the station. James exhaled sharply, his eyes fixed on the Council's flagship, a behemoth twice the size of any other vessel in the fleet. It was positioned directly above Haven Station's primary docking ring, casting a monstrous shadow over the station. The message was clear. There would be no escape. A desperate stand. Inside the station's control room, alarms blared. Red emergency lights cast shadows across the tense faces of the crew. Shield strength at 28%. A technician reported, voice tight with fear. They'd been scanning us non-stop for 3 days, the commander muttered. We won't hold much longer. James clenched his jaw. The station's shields had been worn down, not by direct attack, but by constant probing scans, a slow and methodical weakening of their defenses. Once the shields fell, the Council wouldn't hesitate. He glanced at the station's tactical display, his heart sinking. The refugee ships, hundreds of them, were crammed along the docking arms like frightened birds, their pilots desperately hoping for a miracle. Many of them had traveled across the galaxy to escape Council oppression, only to find themselves trapped here. James felt rage simmering beneath his fear. This wasn't war. This was an extermination. The commander turned toward his communications officer. Send another distress call. All frequencies. But sir, the officer hesitated. The Council jammed our long-range comms days ago. No one can hear us. The commander's expression hardened. Someone has to be listening. The officer swallowed but relayed the call anyway, knowing full well that it would fall into the void like the others. The final ultimatum. Admiral Reed's voice returned. Haven Station, this is your final warning. You have 5 minutes to surrender. If you do not comply, we will take more direct action. A hush fell over the station. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Then, a distant rumble vibrated through James's ship, a low, ominous hum that sent a chill down his spine. The Council warships had begun charging their main cannons. James's ship's AI confirmed it. Energy signatures detected. Enemy fleet weapon systems are at full charge. Estimated time to fire: 4 minutes. The silence in Haven Station's control room was absolute. James took a slow breath. His gaze drifted back to the refugee ships, to the thousands of innocent lives trapped here. This was it. The end. The unknown appears. And then, the universe tore open. The very fabric of space twisted at the edge of the system, spiraling into a vortex of crackling blue-white energy. Every sensor in the sector screamed alarms. A tear in reality itself had appeared. From the swirling anomaly, a lone ship emerged. It was smaller than the Council's vessels, barely a third the size of Admiral Reed's flagship. Its blackened hull pulsed with streams of electric blue energy, forming intricate patterns that ran like veins of liquid light across its surface. The ship's design was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was alien, yet unmistakably human. A name etched into the side of its hull flickered as it passed through the vortex. TSS THUNDR. Inside Haven Station, silence turned to chaos. What is that? A ship. It's human. A Terran warship. James stared in disbelief. He had heard rumors, whispers of a secret project, a ship designed not to fight conventionally, but to break the rules of war itself. The Thunderchild had arrived, and everything was about to change. The arrival of the Thunderchild. The unified Galactic Council had spent centuries perfecting its dominion over the stars. Its fleets were vast, its technology advanced, and its doctrine unchallenged. For over 100 years, no enemy had dared to defy its might. Until now. The TSS Thunderchild emerged from the swirling vortex of space like a myth made real. Its hull, sleek, dark, and pulsating with ethereal blue energy, was unlike any ship humanity had ever built. The vessel didn't just move through space. It commanded it, as if the universe itself was bending to its will. On Haven Station, the command center was in chaos. Officers shouted over one another, sensor alarms blared, and a growing, stunned silence spread through the ranks as they watched the impossible unfold. Captain James Carter, still aboard his small merchant vessel, stared at the mysterious warship, his breath caught in his chest. Thunderchild, it actually exists. For years, there had been whispers of a classified Terran project, a warship unlike any other, built not to fight conventionally, but to rewrite the rules of battle itself. It was rumored to be equipped with experimental technology so advanced that even the Council couldn't comprehend it. Until now, James had dismissed the stories as fantasy. But here it was, real, present, ready. And the unified Galactic Council had no idea what they were about to face. The Council's fear. Inside the Council's flagship, Admiral Victor Reed narrowed his augmented eyes as he watched the Thunderchild on his tactical display. The ship's energy signature was unreadable, its design unlike anything in human or Council records. For the first time in years, Reed felt something he hadn't experienced since his betrayal of humanity. Fear. His bridge officers exchanged uneasy glances, awaiting his command. "Sir, the Thunderchild's readings make no sense," First Officer Rye said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Its power output is off the charts, but there are no conventional weapon signatures. No railguns, no plasma turrets, nothing we recognize." Another officer turned in his chair. "Admiral, they're scanning us." Reed stiffened. "Return the scan. I want to know what that ship is made of." Rye hesitated. "Sir, I don't think we can." "What?" Reed snapped. Rye swallowed. "Their ship's defenses. It's not just rejecting our scans. It's altering them. Our sensors show what they want us to see." The Admiral's cybernetic eye flickered with frustration. No one manipulated Council technology. No one. Fine, he growled. If they won't speak first, we will. A message across the stars. A sharp tone filled the communication channels, and a cold, calculated voice filled the silence. This is Admiral Victor Reed of the Unified Galactic Council. Identify yourself. The Thunderchild did not respond. Reed's jaw tightened. This sector is under Council control. Any unauthorized military vessel entering this space will be. The comms interrupted him. A new voice came through. Smooth, confident, and undeniably human. We know who you are, Admiral Reed. The voice was calm, unshaken, even amused. And we know what you've done. A silence followed, thick and suffocating. Every officer on Reed's bridge exchanged nervous glances. The Council was not used to being ignored. Reed clenched his fists. You will power down your vessel and... No. One word. One simple word. But it carried the weight of an empire's defiance. And it sent chills down the spines of everyone on that bridge. The first attack. Reed's patience snapped. Fire on the Thunderchild, he ordered coldly. The command sent a ripple through the fleet. 20 warships adjusted their positions, aligning their weapons onto the lone human vessel. Their firepower could reduce moons to rubble. They fired. Beams of green plasma, railgun slugs, and missile swarms streaked through space, converging on the Thunderchild in a deadly synchronized assault. The impact should have been devastating. The combined might of a planetary siege force focused on a single ship. Instead, nothing happened. The moment the weapons reached the Thunderchild's hull, they simply vanished. The bridge of Reed's flagship fell into a stunned silence, a technology beyond comprehension. James Carter, still aboard his merchant ship, watched the exchange in awe and horror. The Thunderchild remained unscathed, floating in space as if the attack had never happened. The Council's fleet hesitated. Even their most powerful weapons had no effect. Admiral Reed's cybernetic eye twitched in frustration. What is this sorcery? He hissed. A whisper ran through his officers. Sir, they're defenses. It's not armor. It's something else. Before anyone could react, the Thunderchild moved. Not in a conventional way, not with the slow, measured maneuvering of typical warships. It disappeared from one position and reappeared in another, as if space itself had folded around it. And then, it retaliated. Panels along its dark hull shimmered, revealing strange metallic rods that pulsed with blue energy. Then, in a flash of light, the rods activated. A shockwave of pure energy rippled outward, passing through the Council's fleet like an invisible storm. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then chaos erupted. The battle begins. One by one, Council warships began losing power. Their engines failed, their weapon systems shut down, their shields flickered and collapsed. Inside the flagship, alarms screamed. Officers scrambled at their controls. Admiral, we're losing power across the fleet. Reed's eyes widened. How? They didn't even fire a weapon. Ray's face went pale as he stared at the readings. Sir, they didn't disable our ships. They hacked them. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. The Thunderchild wasn't just a warship. It was a living weapon, a machine that fought not with brute force, but with intelligence beyond their understanding. It had turned the Council's fleet against itself. Reed's hand clenched into a fist. This is impossible, he muttered. No human technology is this advanced. He turned to his officers. Switch to manual override. If we can't fight with technology, we fight with brute force. The remaining operational Council warships rushed forward, their crews desperate to crush the Thunderchild with sheer numbers. But as they closed in, the Thunderchild vanished again, and when it reappeared, it was directly behind the flagship. A final message echoed across the battlefield. Your time is over, Admiral. And then, the real fight began. The Thunderchild unleashes hell. The Unified Galactic Council's fleet had never known defeat on this scale. They had waged wars across the cosmos, subjugating entire civilizations without resistance. They had crushed rebellions before they could start, enforced peace through absolute domination, and rendered opposition obsolete with overwhelming numbers. But today, they faced something beyond their understanding. The TSS Thunderchild hovered in the void of space, silent and unmoving, like a predator toying with its prey. Its arrival had shattered the Council's confidence. Its defenses had ignored their most powerful weapons. Its attacks had crippled their fleet without firing a single traditional shot. And now it was time to end the battle. The chaos of war. Inside the Council's flagship, Admiral Victor Reed watched the Thunderchild with burning hatred. His cybernetic implants twitched, struggling to process the impossibility of the situation. How had this happened? How had the Council, the ultimate power in the galaxy, been reduced to a helpless spectator in its own battle? Across the bridge, alarms blared. Officers shouted, frantically trying to regain control over their crippled systems. "Sir, our fleet is losing control. Our primary weapons are offline. Shields are failing. Multiple ships have shut down. They can't move." Reed slammed his fist into the console. "How is this possible? That ship, it hasn't fired a single missile." First Officer Ray's face was pale as he studied the Thunderchild's energy readings. "Sir," he whispered, "they don't need missiles." Reed turned, his expression dark. "Explain." Ray hesitated. "They're rewriting physics." The bridge fell silent. "The Thunderchild isn't just using advanced technology," Ray continued, his voice almost reverent. "It's manipulating reality itself. Their ship isn't just moving, it's bending space. Their shields aren't just absorbing energy, they're converting it. They're not fighting with brute force." His breath hitched. "They're fighting with knowledge." A silence stretched across the bridge. Then, the Thunderchild moved. The ghost in the void. One moment, the Council's warships had the Thunderchild locked in their sights. The next, it was gone. Not cloaked, not hidden, just gone. "What the hell?" a bridge officer shouted. "Where did it go?" Reed's cybernetic eye flared red, scanning the battlefield. "Find them." And then, the Thunderchild reappeared. But it wasn't in the same place. It had materialized directly inside the enemy fleet. Its blackened hull shimmered, warping in and out of phase with reality. The ethereal blue veins coursing along its body pulsed brighter and brighter. And then, without warning, the sky turned white. A wave of pure, blinding energy exploded outward from the Thunderchild. It passed through the Council's ships like a ghostly storm, leaving no visible damage. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the warships began to fall. A fleet in freefall. James Carter watched from his merchant ship as the impossible unfolded. The Council's warships, the same ones that had arrived with unstoppable confidence, were now drifting lifelessly through space. One by one, their engines sputtered and died. Their weapons shut down. Their hulls groaned and cracked, as if the very essence of their construction was unraveling. "What the hell is happening?" James whispered. His ship's AI responded in a calm monotone. "The Thunderchild has altered the quantum structure of the Council's fleet." James blinked. In English, "Their ships no longer obey the laws of physics." James's breath caught. The Council warships, once unstoppable behemoths, were now unmoored from reality itself. Some ships floated upward, defying gravity and inertia. Others began stretching and warping, as if being pulled apart by invisible hands. One ship simply vanished, collapsing into a single point of energy before disappearing entirely. The unified Galactic Council's fleet, 50 warships strong, was now falling apart, undone by forces they could never understand. The Admiral's desperation. Admiral Reed gritted his teeth, his hands clenching into fists. His augmented brain struggled to process what was happening. This wasn't war. This was annihilation. He turned toward his officers, his voice laced with barely controlled fury. "We need to retreat." Rai hesitated. "Sir, our ships, they can't move." Reed's augmented fist slammed against the console, cracking the metal. "Then we fight." He turned to his weapons officer. "Fire everything we have. I don't care if it kills us. We will not let them win." The officer paled but obeyed. The Council's flagship unleashed its full arsenal. Torpedoes, plasma beams, railgun slugs. Every weapon screamed toward the Thunderchild. The human warship remained silent, unmoving, waiting. Then, it vanished again. The entire bridge of Reed's flagship went silent as the Thunderchild phased out of existence, only to reappear directly above them. A message came through the comms. Soft, calm, unshaken. "You should have left when you had the chance." Then, the Thunderchild unleashed hell. The end of the Council's reign. A storm of energy erupted from the Thunderchild, cascading across the battlefield like a tidal wave of destruction. But it wasn't just destruction. It was retribution. Ships detonated instantly, their hulls torn apart as if being unwritten from history. Others were simply pushed away, sent drifting into the void, never to return. The Council fleet, once the most powerful armada in the galaxy, had been reduced to a graveyard of shattered steel. And the Thunderchild did not take a single scratch. The aftermath. On Haven Station, silence filled the control room. The officers, the refugees, the soldiers, they all watched the destruction in stunned awe. The Council had lost, and the Thunderchild had won without breaking a sweat. James Carter sat in his cockpit, his heart pounding. He had heard stories of human ingenuity, human resilience, human defiance. But he had never imagined this. The era of the Council was over, and the era of humanity had just begun. The wrath of Thunderchild. The unified Galactic Council's fleet, once an unstoppable force, was now a graveyard of wreckage and drifting vessels. 50 of the galaxy's most feared warships had entered the battle above Haven Station, ready to exterminate the last free human outpost. They had expected submission. They had expected fear. They had never expected the Thunderchild. Now, their entire armada lay in ruins, undone by a single Terran warship, a vessel that defied the very laws of physics and warfare. On the bridge of the Council's flagship, Admiral Victor Reed stood motionless, his cybernetic enhancements overloading with conflicting data. His augmented eye twitched, struggling to comprehend the sheer impossibility of what had happened. The Thunderchild had not fought them with firepower alone. It had rewritten the battlefield itself. And now it was coming for him. The ghost ship moves again. The wreckage of the fallen Council fleet floated eerily in the black void of space. Fires burned in the oxygen pockets of ruined ships. Broken hulls drifted aimlessly, the remains of captains and crews lost to the abyss. But one ship still stood. Admiral Reed's flagship, a behemoth of war twice the size of any other vessel in the fleet. And now it was alone. His ship's remaining officers turned toward him in silent terror, awaiting orders. Reed's hands trembled as he gripped the command console. He had never lost a battle. Until today. "Sir," First Officer Reed whispered, his voice shaking. We should surrender." Reed's organic eye burned with hatred. "Surrender." He spat. "To a single ship." "Sir, it's not just a ship," Rai said, swallowing hard. "It's something else." The words hung in the air like a curse. The bridge's red emergency lights cast deep shadows over their faces as they watched the Thunderchild float toward them, unscathed, untouched, unstoppable. Then, without warning, it vanished. The officers froze. One moment, the human warship had been approaching. The next, it was gone. Not cloaked, not hidden, just erased. Reed's cybernetic implants frantically scanned the void, searching for any trace of the Thunderchild. And then, the ship reappeared, directly above them. The final confrontation. A single, chilling message crackled through the comms. Admiral Reed, you have nowhere left to run. Reed's breath caught. For the first time in his life, he felt fear. The voice that spoke wasn't robotic. It wasn't menacing. It was calm, composed, and deeply human. Reed's hatred surged to the surface. His pride, the same arrogance that had led him to betray his own species, refused to accept defeat. He turned to his officers. All weapons, fire. The flagship's remaining turrets spun to life, unleashing a desperate final barrage. Plasma beams, railgun slugs, hypercharged missiles. Every last weapon fired at the Thunderchild. But the moment the weapons made impact, they passed through it. Like a ghost, the Thunderchild wasn't physically there. Reed's augmented brain struggled to process what he was seeing. His ship's weapons had fired at an illusion, a hologram, a projection of something that wasn't entirely in this reality. Then, the truth hit him. The Thunderchild wasn't just a warship. It was a weapon that existed on multiple planes of reality at once. Reed's face twisted in horror. Impossible. But the battle had already been decided. The Thunderchild was done playing games. The Thunderchild's ultimate weapon. The human warship pulsed with energy. The glowing blue veins along its hull flared brighter than a star, shifting between solidity and incorporeality like a mirage in space. James Carter, watching from his merchant ship, could barely breathe. Whatever the Thunderchild was about to do, it was going to be biblical. The massive warship unleashed its final attack. It wasn't a beam. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't an explosion. It was a ripple in space itself. A shockwave of pure distortion expanded outward, engulfing Reed's flagship. For a fraction of a second, everything froze. And then, the ship began to unravel. Not explode. Not break apart. Unravel. The molecular structure of the flagship dissolved before their eyes, as if the ship had never truly existed in the first place. Bulkheads warped. Steel became mist. The once mighty warship faded away, piece by piece, until only the command bridge remained, floating in empty space. Admiral Reed stood there, his once imposing figure small, powerless, defeated. And then, even that was gone. The final remnants of his ship disappeared into the void. Admiral Reed, the man who had betrayed humanity, had been erased from existence. And just like that, the battle was over. A new era begins. The silence that followed was absolute. The battle had lasted less than 15 minutes. But in those 15 minutes, the unified Galactic Council's mightiest fleet had been obliterated. The Thunderchild hovered in space, motionless, victorious. Inside Haven Station, thousands of refugees and soldiers watched in stunned silence. For the first time in decades, humanity had not just survived. They had won. James Carter, still aboard his merchant vessel, exhaled slowly. "That's it," he muttered. "The council's done." And in that moment, everyone in the sector realized the same undeniable truth. The age of human submission was over. The age of human dominance had begun.